We have a series. The San Antonio Spurs go into Madison Square Garden with all the drama, with all the security, all of that noise, and this young team is able to bounce back after blowing a comfortable lead in the second quarter, after going down, going into the half. The Knicks come out firing in the second half, and all of that drama while being down 2-0, they get a win on the board. They steal a home, or they get one game back in their home court that they lost in the first two games. And now, game 4 is a pivotal, in my opinion, winner goes on to win the series. If the Spurs can come all the way back and make it 2-2, then the Knicks are in a world of trouble. But on the same side, if the Knicks can get a 3-1 lead going into Game 5, what a game that will be for New York trying to break this curse that they've had since 1973. Haven't been to the finals since 1999. This has been a fantastic series to watch. We're going to dive deep into Game 3, how the Spurs were able to pull out this victory, how the New York Knicks struggled. Jalen Brunson, a lot of heliocentric iso ball, let me do it myself. He's shooting, I think, like 31 for 80 or something like that on shots, a horrific efficiency in this series. And yet the Knicks still went to him down the stretch. And for the first time, the Spurs, they're not rattled by that fourth quarter and by, big shots from Jalen Brunson and Josh Hart. They're able to survive that. They don't have a costly turnover or a huge mistake that, loses them the game. They really should be up 2-1 in this series after they had that fantastic performance to come back in Game 2 and blew it with that Wemby turnover. They really should have the lead in this series. And if it weren't for a couple of plays here and there, the Spurs would be up and we'd have a totally different thing to talk about. But as it stands, the Knicks have been the better team for all 48 minutes. And for the first time in this series, the Spurs and Victor Wembanyama were able to get the job done. I want to start with the how this game began, because I think it was really interesting how the Spurs came out after being down 0-2. How would they come out, especially with all the noise and all the crowd energy that was in? I have a note on the crowd energy I want to get to in the back half of the show. It was a weird feeling. It felt like in that arena, and obviously there were a variety and a large amount of factors that played into that, but it wasn't that true New York Knicks energy that you usually get. I'll get to that in the back of the show. I want to start with the big picture, right? And obviously the Spurs, they break up the New York Knicks 13-game winning streak. They hadn't lost till, I think, like mid-April against the Hawks. 46 straight days. That's a ridiculous number of days to not lose, especially in the playoffs when the caliber of opponents that you're playing each and every single game only goes up. Just a ridiculous streak. Most dominant playoff run in NBA history, maybe even in sports history. But at last, it comes to the end. And this game started with something that we didn't see in the first two games. The first two games, in the first couple of minutes of the game, it was a lot of Wemby trying to look for his shot, trying to force mid-range jumpers or even shoot threes, right? And it wasn't working. Karl-Anthony Towns was fantastic at pushing him out to the perimeter, not giving him any open shot. But I loved what the Spurs did, and credit to Mitch Johnson. They used Wemby as a decoy. Instead of him trying to do everything himself. That's actually what the Knicks did in this game, and we see what happened. They used Wemby as a decoy out on the perimeter, forced Karl-Anthony Towns to come out of the paint and guard him because Wemby has that ability to shoot threes. And what does it do? It opens up driving lanes for a guy like, Stephon Castle, or even Dylan Harper when he checked into this game, or even to an extent, De'Aaron Fox, right? De'Aaron Fox is not necessarily looking to score. He's looking to drive, get the defense in rotation, and kick it out. But definitely Stephon Castle and Dylan Harper are looking to punish guys at the rim. And when you're not going up against Karl-Anthony Towns in the paint, and you're going up against OG Anunoby, who's great, or even better, Jalen Brunson or Josh Hart. Josh Hart and OG Anunoby are great defenders, but they're not the 7-foot center that Karl-Anthony Towns is, right? You can get the ball and score a layup around them. That is something you can do. You're not going to do that against Karl-Anthony Towns when Karl-Anthony Towns is locked in, right? Cat definitely has moments where he falls asleep and whatever, but when he's locked in, he's a hard guy to drive and try and score on. And so using Wemby out on the perimeter as that guy that was just drawing attention away, really opened up opportunities for those guys. Quick little side comment on the attention, right? Everybody, right? Obviously the Knicks are up 2-1 right now, and the Knicks might win, the Spurs might win, I don't know. But if the Knicks were to win, there's this conversation about should Jalen Brunson be the MVP or should Karl-Anthony Towns? And obviously Cat has been the better player in these series, right? And everybody's so quick to say, yep, Cat should be the MVP. But Cat's the one that is benefiting from the attention that Jalen Brunson gets, right? Jalen Brunson is not, having a great efficiency series, right? But he shows up in the fourth quarter. Cat hasn't showed up in the fourth quarter. I don't know if he scored a point in the fourth quarter yet. But you look at what Cat's doing for the majority of the game, the first 3 quarters at least, right? And he's been fantastic, right? And it's not necessarily the scoring, but it was what he was able to do to Wemby in the first 2 games, less so in game 3. And you're like, yes, Cat should be the MVP. But he's benefiting from all that, eyes, all the hands that are, turned towards Brunson to stop him from getting anything, right? The Spurs have made it an effort, one of their top priorities to just take Brunson out of the game. Don't let him go, right? Let a guy like Josh Hart beat you. Let a guy like OG Anunoby beat you. And in the first 2 games, they did. Right? And obviously, Jalen Brunson was fantastic down the stretch in both of those games. But for the most part, it hasn't been Jalen Brunson that's done anything, right? He's been similar. Right? I'll talk about what he did in this game because it really didn't help out the Knicks, right? But sort of what Wemby was doing, right? Wemby was a full decoy where he wasn't getting the ball in the first few minutes of the game. Obviously, that changed as the game went on. Jalen Brunson was still getting the ball, but he was forced to get rid of it quickly and kick it out because of the doubles that were coming. And when he did try and go for a shot, they were tough shots, deep mid-range shots, from weird angles, right? He was getting blocked at the rim when he tried to go in against Wemby, and it's resulting in these horrific shooting numbers for Jalen Brunson. Funny enough, right? The crowd energy, maybe this is a good time to talk about that, right? When your cheapest ticket is like $10,000, you're sort of pricing out all the New York Knicks fans that make Madison Square Garden what it is, right? The energy of all different types of people, all different types of families and, life experiences all coming together to support the Knicks, right? And I'm a Celtics fan. It's very similar in Boston. Very, very similar fan bases, in my opinion, right? But then when you make the tickets $10,000, right? The Celtics, the tickets were like $2,000, which a family might be able to afford. Nobody except celebrities are paying $10,000 and upwards to go to a game. So you get this weird fan base that, yes, they're rooting for the Knicks maybe, but maybe they're not as locked in. Maybe they're there for the the celebrations and the Instagram because, they have a $10,000 or should I say $100,000 courtside seat, right? It's a really weird atmosphere in there. And, and then you put in the president and whatever, and it, takes matters up a whole new level. It was just a weird NBA Finals game that, I'm not sure is great for the sport as a whole. That being said, right, it was the Knicks in their home crowd, or home arena, should I say, that looked a little rattled in that series. It was the Knicks, after very much struggling, I think, down the later stages of those two games in San Antonio, right? I think the Spurs made that comeback on the backs of their crowd and the support that they were getting, right? And then they go home and you're like, this could be a backbreaker for San Antonio. They already lost the first two games at home, and then you're going into a crowd like Madison Square Garden. But I really do think that the Knicks were the ones that looked a little stunned in those situations. That being said, Wemby, from that first few minutes onwards, he was dominant. I mean, just dominant. He had his way with Karl-Anthony Towns. Karl-Anthony Towns wasn't getting the calls that he was getting on the offensive end in the first couple of games as well. And so what does that happen? It means Cat, starts to take possessions off on the defensive end. He's very much a guy that, when he's going great on offense, he's going great on defense. When he's, sort of crying on the floor asking for fouls and he's not getting back in defense, he starts to pick up sloppy fouls. He starts to pick up, stupid technicals sometimes, right? All that stuff, very much a Luka type player as well, right? But maybe not to the full extent, and Luka's actually gotten better at that. Cat has had that history, right, where he sort of can become a little bit of a complainer, right, and doesn't lock in for a full defensive possession. And he has like 4 fouls early into the third quarter, has to sit for the majority of the third quarter because of that, and Wemby just went right to work. 32 points, only 8 rebounds. Dylan Harper and Stephon Castle did a great job on the boards as well. Wemby didn't need to be that much of a presence. I don't really care about his rebounding because a lot of the times he's the only 7-footer around, and they're sort of just, I'm not going to say padding the stat line because it's not like he's going for rebounds, right? If they land in his hand, he gets the rebound. But they were definitely some empty rebounds that he got. That being said, 6 assists, had 3 blocks as well, was fantastic in the game. And there's a possession that I'm going to show in the film session that we're going to do. I have like 6 clips or something, so pretty short. But, one of the plays that just shows the defense and the heliocentric type of basketball that the Knicks were playing. I'll get to that later. Right? Just 1 turnover for him as well, right? After that horrific turnover that he had in game 2 to essentially lose the Spurs the game, comes back with a 1 turnover game, 11 of 18 shooting. That is elite efficiency in the NBA Finals, right? With all this, right? Jalen Brunson's having a horrific shooting performance, and it's still well below par, and I understand that, but you have to keep in mind that nobody's going to shoot well in the finals, let alone, a finals against a physical New York Knicks or San Antonio Spurs team with a lot of talented and big, strong wing defenders like a Stephon Castle, like a Dylan Harper, even a Champagne. He's probably the worst defender when he's out there, but he's still a strong 6'5" and above wing that can knock down threes and then hold his own on the defensive end. And then obviously you have Wemby behind them, so even if you make a mistake, you still have another layer if you're the New York Knicks to get past. And often by the time that happens, you're sort of out of time, or you have to throw up a rough shot that has no chance of going in, right? I think the Spurs have done a great job of picking up Jalen Brunson full court, which has then forced, a Brunson or even a Cat when he's bringing up, right, to spin multiple times to get out of a trap, and then you're bringing it across the timeline right as the 8 seconds are expiring. You've already taken off that much time. You're going into your set with like 18 seconds. You can't get that first set to go because of a Stephon Castle or Dylan Harper that did a great job defensively. Now you're at 11 seconds. You're sort of getting antsy, trying to get a shot going. Everyone's moving around. And then it's like 4 or 5 seconds when you finally, can get into the paint and get past that first line of defender. And who's there waiting for you? It's a 7'5" alien that's just going to reject your shot. So, when the Spurs can find a way to get some offense going, they're going to win these games because their defense is that good. Their defense is one of, if not the best defense in the NBA, and I'd argue it is after they went through the Thunder, who people had as the best defense before that. So, you have these two teams. You have a great offense in the Knicks. You have a great defense in the Spurs. And who's going to give way? It's really about, can you make a couple of shots, which the Knicks did for a good chunk of those first two games, and the Spurs were able to get some good luck shooting in Game 3. But then it's the guards. Who else can step up for you, right? The Knicks, we saw Karl-Anthony Towns had his worst game of the series. Jalen Brunson, went ISO mode down the stretch. We'll get to that in 1 second. But you got two elite performances from Stephon Castle and DeAaron Fox. And starting with Stephon Castle, 23 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, 8 of 14 shooting. Just to have another guy that can help out Victor Wembanyama on the offensive end. We've talked about this multiple times. You can go back and check out previous episodes where we've talked about how the Knicks have two guys that can beat you off the dribble in Karl-Anthony Towns and in Jalen Brunson. The Spurs only have one guy, and it's not even a guy that's going to play off the dribble. Wemby is a center. He's not a wing, a power forward. Yes, Karl-Anthony Towns is a center, but he can move more like a power forward, a little bit better off the dribble than a Wemby is. And then obviously you have Jalen Brunson, who's their main ball handler, their star on the team, that can average 30 points a night, right? You leave Jalen Brunson open, he'll go for 40. You leave Karl-Anthony Towns open, he can go for 40 if needed. De'Aaron Fox is not going to go for 40. Wemby has the chance to go for 40, but he needs someone else to create that shot for him. He's not going to come around screens and shoot threes like that, or drive into the paint like a point guard. He can't just get to his spot. He needs to do a better job, obviously, and he did in Game 3, of forcing his way into the paint and getting good positioning so that he can have an easy dunk or a layup. But more often than not, it's the movement of the guards that was able to get open shots for Wemby. And so the credit has to go to Stephon Castle and just stepping up and being, I'm not going to say he's the number 2 guy because it's a different guy each and every night, but someone has to be that guy. Someone has to, help out Wemby and get a bulk scoring load, right? It can't be 4 to 5 points from, or should I say 10 to 12 points from a collection of guys. That's not going to get it done because it's still too easy for defenses to pay all their attention to Wemby. You need someone to be going for 25 plus points because then it forces the defense to change their attention away from Wemby. Instead of putting a OG Anunoby on Wemby so Cat can guard, someone else, a non-shooter for the Spurs, you force OG Anunoby to go guard a Stephon Castle, and then that can free up the ability for, if Cat's on Wemby can go back out to the perimeter and play Decoy like he did in the first half. And if Cat's guarding a non-shooter, Wemby can get right into the paint and have his will at any time he wants. Massive dunks. There's a couple plays in the clips where, Wemby just has this unique ability that he's, 7'5", the tallest player on the court at all times, and can move somewhat like a guard, right? As much as we like to, as much as I was just saying how, right, it's hard for Wemby to get his own shot, he still has the ability, if needed, to handle the ball. He's a unicorn, right? He is a ridiculous player. He's going to be, in my opinion, if he stays on this trajectory, the greatest player ever. He's going to make the LeBron-Jordan debate for who's second, not for who's first. I digress on that part. My point is that Stephon Castle was able to show up and provide a much needed addition to Wemby. And then it's De'Aaron Fox, right? And there's been all this talk, especially after games 1 and 2, about how Dylan Harper needs to play more. Dylan Harper needs to be playing over De'Aaron Fox. De'Aaron Fox looks, hobbled. He looks injured, right? He's not having his 20-point-a-night burst that you need badly from, right? But there's a reason that he's out there, right? And Dylan Harper played more. He played up to 33 minutes. I'll talk about him next, right? But he played alongside De'Aaron Fox. They took out Champagne. They had to get Dylan Harper in, right? It was just a matter of who, and it couldn't be De'Aaron Fox. And here's why. Yes, De'Aaron Fox might only score 12 points a night like he did in this game, right? 4-14 shooting, right? He's having a horrific shooting series like Brunson. Okay. He's 0-5 from 3. All of that said. But what is he? He's a guy that's older than 23 years old that can handle the ball for you. He's a guy that's been in the playoffs before. He's a guy that has experience, that can, handle the ball down the stretch of a game when it's a close game, when the nerves are, high, and, you need someone just to calm the offense down. Set up a good play for Wemby to get the ball, or whoever's going to be, the shooter on that possession. And that's what he does, right? He also can give you a couple blocks. When he gets lucky. He had a great block on Karl-Anthony Towns. That's in the film that we'll go over. But he's going to give you the assist. He's going to play make. But the most important thing that he provides, and yes, maybe it's something that should be taken for granted, but he just can get the ball across half court and set up a possession without, giving it to the Knicks on a live ball turnover, without, running some play that, ends up in a bad shot. He can get a good shot for the San Antonio Spurs, and you just need a guy like that because, like I said, Wemby's not a center, or Wemby's not a point guard that's going to, do that for you, right? It doesn't even have to go to Wemby. You just need a point guard, right? All teams, whether their best player is a point guard or not, they run their offense through a point guard. You look at the Denver Nuggets, right? Obviously, they have Jokic, who's the best player on that floor when he's on the floor, right? And obviously, he's one of the best players, if not the best player in the NBA right now. But the ball is being brought up through Jamal Murray. It can go to Jokic through screens, and when they actually run their offense, and Jokic uses his incredible passing ability to just break defenses apart. But the ball's being brought up from Jamal Murray. Jamal Murray is running the play. You need a number 2, even if he's not your number 1, that can generate offense. And that's what the combination of Dylan Harper, Stephon Castle, and De'Aaron Fox are doing. And Stephon Castle and Dylan Harper, yeah, they've had some games and some possessions that resulted in live ball turnovers and the Knicks getting easy points. They've looked rattled at times. But having all 3 of them on the floor, and more importantly, having the 2 of them with De'Aaron Fox alongside, just boosts their confidence. De'Aaron Fox can be there to help them when they need it. He's just providing a veteran presence that cannot go unnoticed. But listen, it comes down to defense, right? And that's what the Spurs do. That's their calling card. You have Victor Wembanyama, right? He is a fantastic, maybe the best defender the league has ever seen. But it starts with, how you're able to guard Brunson on the perimeter. And we've mentioned it before, right? But the aggressive switching, right? To have a Dylan Harper, a Stephon Castle, a Wemby, all those guys can switch onto a Jalen Brunson and guard them for a possession, right? The ability to switch every possession, very similar to that Celtics of 2024, where they were able to switch every possession. It makes it impossible to get mismatches, and it makes it impossible to use a screen to get a guy open to either take a 3 or to drive into the paint when you have, every time you come around the screen, it doesn't work because another guy can just step up and switch that and be on you. It makes it really hard to generate open shots, and the Spurs were finally able to tap into that in Game 3, right? Obviously, I think, the rotations were a little bit sharper for Mitch Johnson in Games 1 and 2. They used the minutes well, playing Dylan Harper up into the 33, 34 minutes a night. That is something I think is going to continue to rise because he's been fantastic down the stretches of the game, and he brings that energy, right? Stephon Castle can be a little turnover prone when he, sometimes he tries to put it in his own hands as well and goes to the rim, and, sometimes it results in a bad shot. There were a couple of those in Games 1 and 2, especially ending the half as well, right? Not necessarily the fourth quarter, but, in momentum swings at the ends of quarters. That's been horrific so far for the Spurs, the quarter ending. So you need somebody, that has the energy, but it's not going to be, all over the place, right? And Stephon Castle's getting better. He's only in his second year. But Dylan Harper, as a rookie, what he's able to do, but also stay calm about it, right? Not force the issue if it's not there. And that's why Dylan Harper, I love seeing him play 35 minutes a night. He's growing quickly into one of my favorite players to watch, not on the Celtics. He is a fantastic ball handler, but the aggressiveness, the ability to just have no fear of dunking on some player, he's going to be a fantastic All-NBA guard in the future. But now you switch that to the other end, and you have the aggressiveness of Stephon Castle. You switch that to the other end, and he's aggressive on the defensive end. He's getting into Jalen Brunson's ball handler. He's getting into Karl-Anthony Towns when he picks up the ball, right? Forcing, the Knicks to rethink their offense. Multiple times where Stephon Castle was able to get a deflection and force Jalen Brunson to go back into the backcourt and pick it up. That wastes another 3 seconds. You do that again, that's another 3 seconds. By the time you're getting into your possession, you have Wemby standing at the rim and there's nothing you can do. We've talked about this before. Just the relentless pursuit from the San Antonio defenders has made the difference. Karl-Anthony Towns, yes, Cat was great when he was able to go against Luke Kornet. Luke Kornet has not had a good series. He's been, quite frankly, overmatched, right? Cat has, just beat up on him, right? But the Spurs are adjusting quicker. Wemby, yes, the first 2 games and really throughout these playoffs, right? He's not used to playing the 40 minutes a night, right? He played just 28 in the regular season. But, with another game under his belt, yes, you're a little bit more tired, but you're a little bit, you know how to handle different situations, how to, not, waste energy, use every bit of energy that you have on both ends of the floor, right? You can't take a possession off because Wemby's just, too valuable, or should I say, right? The Spurs can't do anything without him on either end of the floor. Right? He makes or breaks both the offense and the defense for the Spurs. But what you do have from Wemby now is the ability and the smarts to know when, this is a loose ball that I can sprint after, or is this is a loose ball that, wait for another day to sort of, go after those. And it's paying off in the fourth quarters now, where you now have 2 games, and obviously, yes, they lost, game 2. But this is now 2 quarters in a row where I think the Spurs have won the quarter, maybe not the game, but they've won the quarter. Right? Karl-Anthony Towns in this game, when he wasn't going against Luke Kornet, were just horrific because Wemby stepped it up and was just fantastic. I mean, 11 points for him after 18, 25 in the first 2 games. 8 rebounds, yes, a lot of those empty rebounds like Wemby's. That's just what happens when you're 7'5" out there, or even just anybody above 7 feet. He has 8 rebounds, it said he had 8 rebounds, but just 1 assist, 3 steals. Did have 2 blocks, but a much better balance out, right? You get Cat to lower his numbers, and now Wemby can match those numbers or even excel them like he did in this game. You're getting the production from a Dylan Harper, from a Stephon Castle, from a DeAaron Fox, and now you don't have the two guys on the Knicks compared to the one guy for the Spurs. You have a matchup in scoring, and that allows the San Antonio Spurs to come away with a victory. Listen, the Spurs, there are still multiple times within a game where they look a little, all over the place. There are still multiple times, in the fourth quarter, to end halves where the Knicks are, yes, they're able to get shots, and the Spurs sort of, I don't want to say fall asleep, but they fall back into that inexperience that they have. And sometimes it results in a turnover. Sometimes it's just a bad possession and an out of bounds. Sometimes it's a sloppy foul. Right? There's still lots of things that the Spurs have to get better at. The Knicks, or the Spurs, they led by 12 points. The Knicks are able to take a 7-point lead by halftime. Right? The Knicks should not be leading at halftime when you have a 12-point lead in the second quarter. Yes, leads change quickly, but call a timeout. I'm not even mad at the coaching staff. That is on the players, right? You got to adjust when something's not going well. When Brunson's going off, send a couple guys, make someone else beat you, right? You cannot let Brunson get going at any point in the game, right? And they fixed that in the second half for sure. Jalen Brunson did hit a couple big threes in that late second quarter. OG Anunoby got some easy dunks at the rim. One of the plays where he was able to drive past Wemby is in our film review. Just getting the dunks over Wemby started to get the crowd into it, right? And that obviously changes everything because the crowd's all quiet when the Spurs are up 12, 15 points, whatever it was. And then once the crowd gets into it, that changes the whole thing, right? You go from a crowd that's wild at the start of the game till you hear it and whatever, and you're antsed, and it's a little hard to play through that, and then you're able to settle into the game. The crowd gets quieter. The crowd's always going to be quieter during the game, even if you're up, right? But they're down, so it's extra quiet. And then all of a sudden, the crowd gets right back into it because of the shots that Jalen Brunson and whatever are making. And that sort of can startle you as a young Spurs player, right? Jalen Brunson, right, he does get to 32 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, 11 of 25 shooting, 3 of 5 from 3. This is the time to talk about Jalen Brunson. Listen, when the Spurs sort of were ready to pull away, Jalen Brunson did have an answer, right? But he worked extremely hard for everything. There's a clip that I'm going to show you where, Jalen Brunson, I won't spoil it fully, but Jalen Brunson has a lot of outlets that he can pass to for an open shot, and he tries to do it himself. It results in the shot getting blocked. The ISO basketball from Jalen Brunson has been the opposite of what the Knicks have done for the 13-game winning streak that they were on. The Knicks were fantastic at using all 5 guys on the court. Karl-Anthony Towns was involved, right? He was definitely in that back seat role, and he was happy to do that because the Knicks were winning. But too much Jalen Brunson in this game, especially when you can't get a shot, and the Spurs are all geared up to stop you, right? The Spurs were okay, or we're gonna live with guys making shots, right? And you spoiled a great Josh Hart shooting game, right? Josh Hart was fantastic. OG Anunoby was fantastic in this game. Josh Hart had 16 points, 9 rebounds, 4 of 7 from 3. OG Anunoby had 28 points, 9 of 13 shooting, 3 of 7 from 3. So you got the production from the guys that the Spurs were living with, right? So the Spurs, lost this battle essentially, right? They did what they did to stop Jalen Brunson, and they were going to live and die by what the role players for the Knicks did. And the Knicks role players stepped up. They crushed the Spurs in their hopes. But Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns didn't do the right thing in the second half of continuing to go to those guys, continuing to trust that they would knock down the shot. The Knicks would have blown the Spurs out of the water if they kept going to those shots, right? Because they were knocking them down, and I had trust that they were going to continue to knock those down, because there were a lot of times where the Spurs were, sort of crowded up on Jalen Brunson and didn't care if Jalen Brunson kicked it out. But Jalen Brunson chose not to in the later stages of that fourth quarter and really the second half. And that was the difference in this game. Listen, the game's still close because both of these teams are pretty easily matched. There was a 3 from OG Anunoby. They cut it to like 6 or 3 maybe with like, a minute left. And, I got really scared as a guy that doesn't have much rooting interest in either of these teams, but is looking for a longer series and, maybe a little bit of Spurs hope, given that I'm a Celtics fan and, I don't really want the Knicks to win. But that being said, right, the Jalen Brunson offense in that second half was horrific. Right? Listen, New York, their most efficient scorer was OG Anunoby in this game, right? Which is something that, maybe he does score 28 points and he replaces the production that Jalen Brunson is essentially doing. But the Spurs are going to, live and die with that every single time. Like I said multiple times on this show now, the Spurs coming into this game only had one guy that can beat you. The Knicks had 2. And the ability to get other guys to step up but not have it be Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns lowers, or should I say evens that balance between the two. All right, a couple more things, and then I want to get into the film session, and then we'll wrap it up with a little sort of preview of and keys to the game for Game 4 on Wednesday. By the way, we will be live after Game 4. Last night's game, just took forever in that second half. Every minute they stopped it for fouls, free throw shooting, mostly on the Spurs, and everybody's really quick now to talk about that officiating. Quite honestly, the more physical team gets the better whistle. That's just how it tends to go. Also, there were some weird, fouls, and Jalen Brunson definitely should have gotten more shots. But, it should not have been like an even officiated game in the fact that the Spurs were getting better shots. They were more physical. They were driving into the rim, and they were getting fouled. The Knicks weren't doing a lot of that because Jalen Brunson was just throwing up shots. And I'm sorry, in this time of year, and after we saw what the Thunder have been doing all season long and what SGA did in the playoffs, if you are a guy like Jalen Brunson, and yes, maybe he's getting fouled on most possessions, and I'm not saying he isn't, right? There's fouls on every possession. They, refs choose what to call and not. But when you're going in and you're sort of trying to embellish a call, what tends to happen is the refs just tend to swallow their whistles because it's just not an exciting type of basketball to watch, right? And I'm not saying there's an agenda or anything like that. The NBA would hope for a longer series, but I don't think that had anything to do with it. I really do think that even if you are getting fouled, if you're showing that you're getting fouled instead of just trying to just go through the contact and score, you're going to get a worse whistle than if you just, put your head down and got to the rim and you didn't let the slaps on the arm affect you. Refs would see that and start to call it. That's just my opinion on the officiating. That being said, finally, the Spurs, they excel in crunch time, or should I say they don't blow it in crunch time because they've been the better team in the last 2 crunch times. They just haven't been able to close the deal on one of them. Let's get into the film session, and I just have 6 clips. A couple of them are just some awe-dropping, a play from Wemby here, some offense, and then there are a couple of other things that are just some weird things that this possession, is just a symbol of a lot of the things that went on for both sides in this game. Let's start with the clip 1 here, and this is Victor Wembanyama on just a screen and a roll dunk to the rim. So, right, Stephon Castle, and it will play on loop, so, even if you miss it, you can keep watching, right? Stephon Castle, he's bringing the ball up the floor, right? And Wemby comes to set the screen, and after setting it, Wemby's, just sort of dives to the rim, right? And, listen, no Nick follows him into the paint. This is wrong play. This is the play where, the the double comes from Josh Hart and Karl-Anthony Towns. And Wemby, seeing that as a decoy, goes into the paint, and there is an open shooter in the corner. But the double from Josh Hart doesn't come fast enough. You leave Stephon Castle, right? You have 3 defenders there essentially, because you have the timeline, and you have Cat, and you have Josh Hart. This is a great spot to set a screen. Or a trap here. I love this spot if you're the Knicks, but it's got to be much quicker from Josh Hart. You got to get up there. You can't allow Stephon Castle just to rise up and throw a dime into Wemby, and Wemby's going to get an easy dunk, right? But if you're able to trap quicker, Stephon Castle is not going to be able to get up and find Wemby, and OG Anunoby will have more time because OG Anunoby is sort of guarding 2 guys, and he sort of goes out to the shooter in, I think it was DeAaron Fox in that corner, yeah. So he has to make a decision there. But if you're able to get up quicker into Stephon Castle there, you're going to force him to maybe turn the ball over, maybe step into a backcourt, pick up the ball at least, right? And then OG Anunoby can react, right? You're making it impossible for OG Anunoby to do anything on that back line. The second play here is a play where Brunson just gets basically beat off the dribble and a bad close after the screen. Right? I believe Stephon Castle, he gives it to Dylan Harper. Dylan Harper just goes right through the middle of them. I mean, the screen, everybody sees the Wemby screen coming. Or should I say the Devin Vassell screen, rather, coming. Jalen Brunson and I believe it's Karl-Anthony Towns, or Josh Hart, rather, right? He sees the screen, and Brunson is just the split right down the middle. This is just poor defense from Jalen Brunson. You got to be better than that, right? Jalen Brunson might not be the best defender on the court, but you can't get split down the middle from a guy like Dylan Harper, right? This is just too easy of a wide open dunk. Dylan Harper is going to dunk this every single time. Number 3, right? This play actually is from the Spurs, and I thought this play was just some unnecessary help defense off of who's that? Jordan Clarkson in the corner, right? You have Victor Wembanyama in the paint. You have, I believe, Julian Champagnie. You have Dylan Harper. You have Carter Bryant. You have 3 guys. Those 3 guys can stop OG Anunoby. You have plenty of help there. Why are you leaving a shooter in the corner on the strong side to just knock down and break you on a possession? Let Wemby and let Wemby and Fox and I forget who's the other guy now. I'm blanking on his name. Let those 3 guys, and Carter Bryant, right? Let those 3 guys defend OG Anunoby. That's plenty of guys. Don't just make an easy kick out for OG Anunoby in this possession. All right, this play is just Victor Wembanyama being Victor Wembanyama. I mean, easy, just walk to the basket for an easy lob and dunk. Maybe there was something Mikal Bridges could have done and to try and set that, or like maybe hold Wemby out of the paint. Right, he's not going to be able to keep Wemby out because Wemby's much bigger than Bridges is. But Bridges is on the wrong side of Wemby anyway, right? So he's never going to be able to stop him like that without fouling. So just a bad positioning there from Mikal Bridges on that possession. Wemby's probably still going to make that shot because Wemby is just that talented and that unique. But still, you could have done a little bit better job of trying to defend that. All right, this play is a play from Victor Wembanyama where he does this a lot now, right? And Wemby, give him credit. He's one of, if not the best defender the league has ever seen. But he still has a flaw to that defensive game. And that is him closing out too hard and over-closing out. Look at how he just over-closes out on OG Anunoby, gets to the side of him, lets OG Anunoby go right past him for a wide-open dunk. That can't happen. You're 2 feet taller than this guy. Or should I say you're almost a foot taller than him. Maybe 7 inches, right? You're plenty tall enough to stay in front of OG Anunoby, back up a little bit, and if he tries to shoot over the top of you, you can step forward and contest the shot, right? But you can't close out past him. That's never going to work. You're going to let a guy that's going to be faster off the dribble just get right by you, drive, and finish. That's not going to work, because you need somebody, you need Wemby to stay in front of guys and just trust that he's going to be able to block the shot if OG Anunoby or whoever goes up. You cannot, and I repeat, cannot close out like that. Okay, this last clip here is a clip of I believe it's Stephon Castle, Dylan Harper to Champagny, and Champagny does a great job of dishing it over there to Keldon Johnson underneath the basket. This is a play where, for the majority of the first 2 games, Julian Champagny would try and go up and lay that over I believe that's Josh Hart at the time. Jalen Brunson, right? He would try and go up over Jalen Brunson. He's taller. He's going to try and, score that. And just the, ability to slow down, take your time, and find a easier shot compared to you trying to go up and lay that yourself, where maybe you get fouled or maybe you just smoke the layup. I love this ability from a Spurs young guards, right? Maybe Champagny's not that, but the ability, this young team overall, right? They have young team vibes, even if the guys on the team are not necessarily young. The majority in their core is young, right? But the ability to, instead of trying to force a shot up like Jalen Brunson was doing for the majority of the second half, to take your time and to get a better layup than the one you were going to get by dishing it off to Keldon Johnson. Let's wrap up with a couple keys to this game 4, right? And listen, for the Knicks, it's you need less Brunson Ball. You just do. You need more offensive variety, more touches for Karl-Anthony Towns, because the more touches Cat gets, the more likely he is to be locked in and bought in on the defensive end. And you're not going to win without the defense that Cat has been doing for stretches against Wemby, especially in those first 2 games. But it starts with Cat on the offensive end. Like I've said, if Cat is going offensively, he's going to be going defensively. If he's not going offensively, he's not going to be going defensively. That's just how it works for him. Hart did everything he could. You spoiled a great, role player shooting game from guys that maybe not necessarily knock down shots. So that was disappointing for the Knicks, because I don't know if you're going to get a shooting game like you got from Josh Hart in Game 3. But you just couldn't get enough stop late. For the Spurs, right, you continue to get that dribble penetration. Continue to force the Knicks, whoever's defending, to make a decision on who you guard. Do you guard Wemby? Do you guard Dylan Harper, Stephon Castle, all of those guys? And I think the Spurs have found their lineup, their closing lineup at least, with Wemby at the 5, and then you have the 3 or even 4 small guards in Harper, Castle, Fox, and maybe it's a Devin Vassell, maybe it's a Julian Champagny, the other guy, whoever it is. I think having one center out there, and yeah, maybe you need some bigger guys, but the Spurs guards are big already, and it's just seeming to work because you need Dylan Harper out there at all costs right now. But that's going to do it. We will be back on Wednesday evening. Hopefully the game does not take 4.5 hours like that last one felt. Hopefully we're on closer to the 11 side of 11:15 instead of the 11:45 side of 11:15, like when that game ended. But either way, we'll be live after that game. Tune in there. Check me out on Instagram, TikTok, X, wherever you follow on social media. You can check out this podcast and all podcast episodes on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, wherever you listen to your podcast. Right after I'm done recording here, it's going straight up onto Spotify. So that will be live in about an hour that you can check out then. And until next time, go Celtics. And I'm just hoping for the Spurs to win Game 4 and we have a series. We have tons of drama on both sides. The Knicks in just collapse mode, the Spurs rolling. That would be fantastic. But we could also get the other side in a commanding lead for the New York Knicks. It's all going down tomorrow night, 8:30 tip, despite it being on the East Coast. The president won't be there, so hopefully we don't get that drama, because that was just I just feel bad for the fans. And I know I'm rambling here now, but I just feel bad for the fans that had all the watch parties, standing in line for 2.5 hours to get into a game. I mean, that just cannot happen, and it wouldn't have happened if the president didn't decide to show up. All that being said, it's a 2-1 series, and the Spurs are now riding hot on the backs of Victor Wembanyama, Dylan Harper, and the veteran presence of DeAaron Fox.